the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. Tuesday night. Hopefully you're having a great week. About to have even greater rest of the week. And we are going to jump into the second show of the day. And we're going to talk about masculinity today. This is going to be, I think, a tricky issue, but it should be fun. It should be interesting. I'm looking forward to getting interesting questions, challenges, comments. You, of course, can use the Super Chat to do that. So please, I encourage you to do that. I think it'll make the show more interesting, and we'll cover more material with your questions. Feel free, of course, to ask questions about anything, but questions about the topic or comments about the topic would be particularly appreciated. And I think particularly enhance the show itself. Let's see. Before we get to this, I needed one thing. Let me just find it here. Yeah, just a reminder. Tomorrow we'll have a show in the morning. So usual time, probably 1:00. One of our news hour shows, and then we're back on Thursday with both a morning and an evening show. Friday morning, probably earlier, probably 12:00 rather than 1 Eastern time, and then Saturday at 3 p.m. That is the schedule we're going to run through. And I just wanted to open this up because one second. All right, good. So we're going to talk about masculinity. Masculinity is I think a tricky topic to talk about, but I'm bringing it up, and I know it's come up in the past a number of times, but I'm bringing it up because it's all over the news. It's everywhere, and it's hard to understand really. I think the moment in the culture that we're at, if one doesn't understand what is going on with this idea. And you know, I was looking at stuff, and Politico has a whole magazine devoted just to the question of masculinity. The Washington Post had, I think, a significant piece earlier in the month on masculinity, and generally it's something that people are writing about constantly. Josh Hawley, I've mentioned in one of my shows, has written a book on masculinity. A researcher in Brookings Institute wrote a whole book on the problem with men and boys in our modern society. Boys are lagging in almost every measure of success out there. When you look at school, they're lagging both girls and they're lagging previous generations in terms of performance at school, going to college, number of men that go to college. Unemployment among young men is high. That the whole idea of boys still in their parents' basement playing video games is real. You've got incels. You've got men going their own way. You've got a manosphere, and you've got all these influences online talking about being a man and what it means to be a man and masculinity. And so on. It is maybe a manifestation of a lot of issues in our culture, but it is one of the real challenges, I think, that our culture faces right now. And I think it's important to talk about it. And look, I'm not going to have any definitive final answers to this, partially because this is not my area of expertise. My primary qualifications to talk about this is being a man and just a thinker, somebody who thinks about this and reads about stuff and connects it with having a broader philosophy and connecting it to that philosophy and seeing the trends in the world. But I think this explains to some extent, this is the appeal of the new right. The new right appeals in a way to men It is, so this is, and it's a cultural phenomenon. It's obviously also the challenge for men right now is how to deal with feminism and how to deal with women. So we're going to talk about all that, and we're going to try to connect it all. We're going to try to connect it to political moment, to the role of influences, and to biology, history, and see where we get to. So I'm not promising definitive answers. We can talk about Ayn Rand's definition of masculinity. I'm also going to devote the show. I thought I'd do a show on masculinity, femininity, but that's overload. We'll have to do a separate show on femininity, because I want to try to talk about masculinity without the need to constantly talk about femininity, and without the need constantly to say, well, but this is what femininity means. Let's try to nail down what we mean by masculinity, and we can nail down what we mean by femininity. They're related, obviously, and they're defined to some extent in contrast to one another, but I think it's important to nail down what the fold of masculinity actually holds inside of it. What does it contain? What both in the culture does it contain, and what should it contain? What does masculinity mean in the 21st century? Also, I mean, it's a tricky concept to talk about, partially because I don't think masculinity is necessarily only linked to male biology. That is, I think a woman can be masculine. She can have masculine attributes, and that can be attractive or not attractive. That can be that certainly can be positive, is positive. Certainly, one could argue that, and Ayn Rand described herself as kind of, I can't remember the exact quote, but something about she took pride in somebody called her a man or something. There's a certain masculinity to that, and to some of her female characters, there's certain masculine features about it. So I think there's, I want to again separate these out so that we don't get caught up in, if I say masculinity means X, Y, Z, I don't want the women in the audience, and not these particular women, but women generally, to say, wait a minute, but I have those features. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. And the fact that a woman is masculine is not a bad thing any more than necessarily a bad thing. So let's just deal with the concept to see where it takes us and see where we go. And part of the motivation for this is just the prominence of what I think of as really, really, really bad role models, and the success of really, really, really bad role models for masculinity. And here I'm thinking particularly of Andrew Tate, who is in the news constantly, partially because he's under house arrest in Romania, as being accused of rape and trafficking trafficking women, and using violence to intimidate them and for them to work for him. So he's in the news constantly, and it's surprising to me, it's shocking indeed to me, how many people there are out there, who admire him, who thinks he's a positive role model, who he inspires. And it's not, and it's how many men out there. I think the real not revelation, but the real understanding that there was an issue comes with Jordan Peterson, and the extent to which Jordan Peterson appeals to men and how they respond to him, or responded. I don't know if he still has this appeal. I have a feeling some of it is faded. He's become more of a political figure now than anything else. But this kind of self-help and the fact that they needed it is interesting and is fascinating. Was fascinating. And the fact that the right, particularly the new right, and I certainly think that Tate is part of this, is appealing to so many men, and that the whole question of masculinity is now wrapped up with the new right. I mean, think about Bronze Age pervert Bap and his followers, and how much they make of masculinity, and how appealing their ideas are to so many people. I mean, these are not I mean, they're fringe in a sense because their ideas are nutty, but they're not fringe in the sense of how many people watch them, how many people are inspired by them, how many people engage with their ideas. So this is a major issue, and it's a major issue that affects our politics, and it's interesting that it affects our politics, right? It's interesting that it affects our politics, and it affects and the people talking about it are tapping into something because people are responding and they get massive audiences. And the latest thing to really make this clear is the interview that Tucker Carlson did on his new platform, basically on Twitter, with Andrew Tate. It's a 2.5-hour long interview, and I don't particularly recommend it. But it's stunning. The interview is truly stunning. It's stunning in that Tate lies right off the bat, just lies directly to Tucker Carlson. But what's even more stunning is that Tucker Carlson, who is a journalist, right? That's his job. He's presenting the news. He's a commentator. He's supposed to be, his currency is supposed to be facts and opinion, but opinion based on facts. Tate lies to him right off the bat. And lies that are easy to discover. That is, it doesn't take much to, for example, Tucker Carlson asked him what he's accused of. And Tate comes up with this story. And all you have to do is go and read about what he's really accused of. And maybe you need, I don't know, to get a Romanian translator if you really want to dig and get the original documents of his indictment. But Tate says that, no violence. I'm not accused of any violence. He's accused of 2 counts of rape. 2 counts of rape in his arraignment. Right? That's violence. What about the sex video cam stuff? No. Tate says no sex. He was just helping some girls with their TikTok accounts do TikTok videos. I mean, if you read anything about Tate and you know how he made much of his money, it's from webcams where a girl would seduce a guy over the internet, and the guy would pay more money for her to perform, to go naked and maybe perform some sexual acts by video and talk him up. That's how he and it's not that this is the media talking about Tate. You can find videos of Tate explaining exactly what he does. He gets these girls, he makes them fall in love with them, and then he puts them to work for him in these sex things. And but he tells Tucker Carlson none of it is true. No violence. He says he doesn't restrain women, and then you can find a video online of him saying that the girls are not allowed to leave the walled compound where his home is in Romania, that they're not allowed to leave without permission. There's video of him, there's video of him saying all the things that he denies in the interview with Tucker. And I was thinking about that, and it's like he's learned from Trump and from others that if you just lie with a straight face and you lie, and when they call you on the lie, you just say, no, you're wrong, this is the truth. And they say, here's the factual evidence. You say, no, that's not fact, that's nonsense. Here's the truth. And you just do that with no shame, no embarrassment, no hedging, no phase, without letting it phase you. You just declare that this is the truth. Even though you know, and the whole world knows that it's a complete lie, you can get away with it. And Tucker, of course, who is supposed to challenge, that's the role of a reporter usually, is to challenge his guests about what he's saying with the truth, just lets it roll. Does nothing. Doesn't challenge him one iota. Just lets it roll. And completely sanctions and endorses and facilitates Andrew Tate's presentation of himself as just as somebody being abused by the system, really somebody being abused by the matrix, to use his words, somebody being abused by the mainstream media. He's a saint. He's done nothing wrong. He never has done anything wrong. He treats women beautifully. He's never used violence. He's never, asked a woman to perform sexual acts on herself and others for money. He doesn't do that kind of stuff. No. He's a good boy. And the Tucker just rolls with it. And he says this, and everybody buys it, and they go for 2.5 hours as if this is a legitimate person to be interviewing, as if this is a cultural icon to be interviewing. And it says a lot about the state of our culture. It says a lot about the state of the right in particular, that this is acceptable, that this is good, that Tate is a hero. And Tucker Carlson has just elevated him from a hero to a fringe to a hero to a massive Tucker Carlson audience. Because what Tucker Carlson does is he lets Tate express all the things that are non-offensive, all the things that are pretty good about him, and ignore all the really offensive, horrible, really disgusting things about him. And these are models of masculinity, Tate and Tucker. And a lot of what they talk about is masculinity, because a lot of this is, a lot of what they complain about, and I think a lot of the complaints are true, a lot of what they complain about is, look, men are failing, men are not doing well in the world, deaths of despair are primarily hitting men. Young men are desperate. They don't know how to deal with women. They don't know how to deal with their own life. Of course they don't know how to deal with women, because they don't know what to do with their life. They don't know what masculinity means. And to a large extent, you could argue that there are two causes for this, at least as I think the mainstream sees it, the better mainstream sees it. There are two causes for this. I think there are other causes, but these are two. One is, many of these men are growing up in households where they don't have a father, and they don't have male role models. And even the fathers they have, they're not really talking to them about what it means to be a man, how to live as a man, and what's expected, and what does good mean. Now, I think this is much broader than just men. I think this is much broader in a sense that we don't have, our culture has a horrible definition of what is goodness, what is virtue. And then, of course, the second reason is the left. And I think they're absolutely right here. They're absolutely right. The left is attacking men, has been attacking men for 20, 30 years now. Part of the modern feminist movement is a certain hatred or a looking down on men. Who needs men? The whole idea of toxic masculinity, not as a form of masculinity, but as the essence of masculinity, as being toxic. The attempt to feminize men in a real way, looking down and making fun of and putting down what were traditional masculine features. And we'll get to what traditional masculinity is and what it should be in the modern era, without providing any replacement, without providing other than stop being a male, stop being masculine. And of course, the whole agenda of I think of much of the LGBTQ plus whatever, the whole idea of multiple genders, a lot of that drives home the point that being male, being masculine is meaningless. There is no such thing. Or that it's whatever you want it to be, a complete subjectivism. There's also the idea that men have always treated women badly, that men have been, The whole idea of a patriarchy and the way all men are brutes, and all men have treated women and put them down and put them in their place, and women have not been able to advance, and it's all your fault. This goes together with all the guilt that we're supposed to have for the color of our skin, for our heritage, for our genes, for our ethnic background, for whatever, for our sexuality. Guilt, 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 guilt. Well, one of the things you should feel guilty of is being masculine, is being a man, because your ancestors put down women. And so the whole modern, unfortunately, the very modern feminist movement, the modern left, the trans movement, all in some way or another anti-men, anti-male, anti the identification of male. And they have no interest in offering, if you will, a new model of masculinity to men. What for? Old model was bad. The old model is irrelevant in the modern world, and you could argue that they have a point, that it is irrelevant in the modern world. But you don't need a model, because there's no nature, there's no essence of being a man, there's nothing different than anything else. So, I mean, they've got this conflict. On the one hand, you've got young women who want to become men. Well, if they want to become men, then they want to become something different. And then on the other hand, they tell you there is no such thing as a man. It's a social convention. Well, what are these women trying to convert into? I mean, the left is very confused. It's very, very confusing, right? So we've got a situation where men don't have role models. They often don't grow up with male role models. The role models they see in the movies, particularly in modern movies, are not particularly inspiring. Whatever strength, whatever masculinity you see in movies is either a strength of muscle and action, or of superheroism and super muscle and super action. But there's very little strength of character in our movies today. There's very little what I would consider real masculinity portrayed in our movies today. Women in the uptick, suddenly, over the last 50, 60 years, women are competing with men for the jobs. Women are more likely often to get the jobs because they're more likely to have a college education, and they're more likely to be invested. And as a consequence, men don't know what to make of themselves. They don't know where to place themselves. They don't know what to do with themselves. And they feel under attack. And they are really in a place. And this is, all the statistics show this. I mean, the statistics about boys and about school and about grades and about going to college and jobs and work. All the statistics are showing you have a real problem today with men in our society, a real problem with boys in our society. And to a large extent, this centers around masculinity. And we know that because what is their solution? The solution is to be attracted to somebody like Tate. The solution is to go in mass, to listen to Jordan Peterson tell you to stand up straight and make your bed and tidy your room. Just be a human being. Why do they need to be told that? Well, because there's a real problem. There's a real problem. It's not a pretend problem. It's a real problem. And if you talk to men, you see the problem. And of course, again, you've got of course men going their own way. You've got incels. You've got the manosphere, which teaches men what? I think more than anything is to just what Andrew Tate teaches them, to exploit women, to find women to exploit, to teach them how to exploit women. And yes, some of the things they teach and some of the things that Andrew Tate says are right on. Be strong, take responsibility, work hard, earn a good living. Yeah, all those things are right. And to do what with it? Ultimately, the purpose of it all is to manifest your sexual drive by exploiting women, by manipulating them, by getting them, figuring out how to get them. Not how to find a woman who you can love, not how to find a woman who is your equal in some sense. No, but to find a woman to have sex with, and as many women as possible, as many times as possible. And of course, you can buy a lot of cars and nice clothes and big houses, but all for the purpose ultimately of manipulating, exploiting women. And part of the problem men have today is they don't know how to deal with women. Women are stronger, more self-sufficient, more in a position to take care of themselves. They don't need a breadwinner. They don't need somebody to work for them. They don't even need somebody to protect them. So you're getting more and more and more women out there who are, really strong. How do you deal with that as a man? How do you stand up? How do you engage with somebody? How do you engage with a woman as a man when, in many respects, when she might be making more money than you? Most men can't handle that. Most men can't handle that. They haven't been taught how to handle that. Their model for masculinity is they're the ones who bring in the money. They're the ones who take care of the woman. And yet she's making more money than you. How does that work? Yeah, and we've already got one of these guys online who wants to deal with women as evolutionary beings, which means beings of no free will, beings incapable, beings of no reason. Reason requires free will. Beings that haven't changed since 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. When women clearly have changed because human environment has changed over the last 60 years ago. And the reality is that over the last 60 years, women have gotten themselves into a position where they can make more money than you can. Evolution didn't teach them that. Evolution didn't train them to do that. This is not out there in the African, plains where you needed physical strength in order to survive and the woman was somewhat subservient to you. No more. In a modern society, what you need in order to thrive, in order to make a lot of money, in order to succeed, among other things, is brains. Brains. Women have brains. Women have reason. And that's what so many men cannot deal with. And that's a big part of the crisis of masculinity, is this changing roles and the fact that men don't know how they belong with this changing roles. So let's try to deal with that. Let's try to address that. So what has traditionally masculinity meant? What did it mean to be masculine 100 years ago, 200 years ago, certainly 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago? What was the role of a man in society? Well, masculinity represents strength. The male, you lived in a world of physical reality where both the production of food, the production of the necessities of survival required physical strength. It also required the mind, but it also required a significant amount of physical strength. The world was a violent place. So it required physical strength not just to produce, but also to protect. So manliness, masculinity, embodied strength, and embodied courage, the courage to deal with the enemy, but also the courage to deal with nature, the courage to deal with the physical things that had to be changed in order for you to survive, whether it was plowing the fields, whether it was moving the boulder, whether it was, shaping the iron. Almost everything that was required for human survival required elements of reason, but required some aspect and in many respects, a significant aspect of physical labor, physical force. And that's where men stood out. We're stronger than women. And yeah, I know there's strong women, but again, if you look at the distribution, men, women, men generally are stronger than women. It required a certain assertiveness, leadership, moving forward, because the world was a physical world in which we needed to push forward, to move forward as human beings. So a big part of masculinity was about protecting women who are weak, protecting children who are weak, protecting your women and your children. It's about the ability to fight. Throughout history, masculinity was associated with the ability, the strength, the willingness, the courage to go out there and fight to protect what was yours, fight to protect the things that were important to you. And having that capability was one of the things that would attract a woman to you. She was weak. She needed protection in a violent world. She needed somebody to move the boulders. She needed somebody to plow the fields when so much of that was dependent on muscle. And men, by evolution, in nature, men have significantly more testosterone than women. Testosterone is a hormone that allows men to develop more muscle. It allows men to have more energy in certain circumstances. It provides men with the ability to be much more aggressive. So nature has shaped us for this kind of division of labor. This is what men do in a society in which physical labor and physical force and muscle are necessary. Men are the ones who provide it. Men are the ones who provide it. And this is how human beings have lived forever. Right? And, the strength of muscle, the strength is also a strength of character. This is where the courage and the independence come from. The leadership, the driving forward, the building, making, creating, shaping the world. But all driven by, historically, and from an evolutionary perspective, all driven by strength, by the fact that we have different bodies. And we have a body that is designed for physical strength and physical labor, and again, for fighting. And we have a hormone that makes that a lot easier for us to do. A lot more natural. But what happens when the world turns? And the world suddenly becomes a place where, first of all, it's pretty safe. That is, the world turns into a place where physical strength is not valued anymore, or not much. Because there's police and you don't need to, the crime is very low and, violence is very rare. And the need to use physical strength actually to defend your wife or your kids is like a freak occurrence. How often have any of you fought physically to protect your woman or to protect your kids? It's very unusual. It's very rare. Good. That's civilization. So strength then becomes less of a value. And in the past, where women might have valued strong, well, maybe now they value it less, because the fact is that strength doesn't buy them much. They can buy a revolver. They can probably buy an M16. to protect them. And a man who's not that physically strong can protect them just as well because he can buy those weapons. So it becomes, even the protection feature becomes a lot less about muscle and a lot more about where you live, how safe it is, where you choose to live because you can move, and whether you purchase a weapon or not. Right? So, the physical strength aspect of it, from a protection perspective, is not valued less. Objectively, just less valuable. Less valuable for survival. Less valuable for living. It's nice to have. There's still things, it would be nice to have that feature, but it's not necessary anymore. It's not life or death anymore. It used to be. And this is why you can't understand human beings. You can't understand modern society if you just look at it from an evolutionary perspective. Because evolution designed us for nature, for the world out there. It didn't design us for air-conditioned, police, safe communities. It didn't design us for M16s. It, in a sense, designed us for the wilderness. We override evolution. We override evolution through technology. We override evolution through the fact that today a weak man can kill a strong man like that if he's better trained on a rifle than the strong man. He doesn't have to wield a heavy sword. Physical strength doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't, even for protection. It's so unusual, it's so rare that evolutionarily and from a human survival, human life perspective, just is insignificant. So you can talk about evolution all you want, but evolution right now is irrelevant. And the fact that we have reason and the fact that we have free will, a woman who used to be attracted to a male because of his strength, because he could protect her, now that she can grade that down as less important to her. And the same thing, of course, is with work. We'll get to sports and athletics in a minute. The same thing is true of work. It used to be that to make a living, to produce, required an ability to go out into nature and to work your muscles hard. Yes, every work requires some thinking. But the balance between thinking and physical work used to be a little bit of thinking, lots of physical work. Again, you had to be strong. You had to know nature. You had to know how things worked out there. You had to be willing to face the animals, to face the elements. Yeah, movie 300. Daniel says, movie 300 is masculine as hell. But is it? It is for that period in Greece, at least in Sparta. But does that represent masculinity today? I mean, those guys in the 300 are losers in the world today. They spend all their days in the gym. They're not the billionaires. They're not the successes. They're not the ones who are changing the world. They're not the leaders. Look at the leaders out there. Look at the corporate leaders. Look at who leads in the world today. It's not men like the 300. It's not anywhere near men like that. That's just our longing for a Bronze Age. Everything's about physicality and courage and slaughter and fighting. But we live in the 21st century. And we are human beings. And we have elevated ourselves above nature in that sense. We have made it so we don't need that physical strength in order to survive. We don't need that physical strength in order to fight. We don't need that physical strength in order to move boulders. We have a tractor. And anybody could use the tractor. So, while strength of character is still required, the strength of muscle and the need to use muscle in order to survive and to thrive is gone. And that means we have to change our view of a positive, of masculinity as a positive, which it should be, of what a man is and what a man is capable of, what a man should be accordingly. It's important to be strong because life requires that you build muscle and stay healthy, and as you get older, muscles become more important. It's good to be fit because it's healthy and so on. But it's no longer the essence of what it is to be masculine. I didn't say women should not be in the military. Women should not be in combat positions. And we can talk about that when we talk about, we'll talk about it in a minute, actually, because it relates to masculinity. It's absolutely, the concept of masculinity today does not have to necessarily involve sheer strength. It should involve health. I mean, courage is a virtue. Yeah, so it should involve courage. And it should involve maybe instead of protecting our women and protecting our kids and when they don't need that much protection and being the breadwinner when maybe they don't need that much breadwinning, right? Maybe what masculinity should really mean today is taking responsibility. Taking responsibility for your own life, living that life to its fullest as a man, taking responsibility for your family, taking care of them, giving them the attention they deserve and require, being a model for your kids, being there for your wife, standing firm by her side, being in some way a leader in that context, being determined, being assertive, having courage. But it's so much, less about the physicality of all that, and so much more about the moral character. So much more about your ability to reason. Personal responsibility is primarily about what you do with your mind and then how you live your life based on your moral values. And that's what it should mean to be masculine. To be masculine is to live a life of virtue, a life of reason, a life of strength of character, a life of assertiveness, of striving, men tend to be generally more risk-taking. A life of risk-taking, rational risk-taking, pushing the envelope. Men tend to be more inclined towards action. It's interesting. Somebody sent me this. I assume it's true because the person who sent it to me wouldn't send it otherwise. But he said that Harry Benswanger mentioned in passing on one of HBTV episodes that in a private conversation with Ayn Rand, that Ayn Rand defined her definition of masculinity that she told Harry in this personal conversation was decisiveness in action. Decisiveness in action. Again, of course, women can be decisive in action. And I don't know. I'm not. Decisive in action captures something. It captures the action nature that men bring to the table, that testosterone inclines them towards. And that decisiveness, that ability to make decisions, that ability to take risks, all in the context of being a rational being, of using your mind. And I think masculinity today should encompass the idea of having the courage, having the self-confidence, having the self-esteem to recognize that women are just as smart as men. To recognize that women can earn more than a man. The women in the realm of thinking are just as good as men. And in that sense, when looking for a partner, a lot to look for somebody inferior to you, not somebody weaker than you in the essential characteristic of survival, but somebody who can walk side by side with you in terms of their ability to reason, to think. Right? So instead of men today wanting to domineer women, wanting to control women, wanting to manipulate women, which is what you get from Andrew Tate, wanting to score as many women as they can, masculinity really means trying to find greatness in women, trying to find your match in a woman, trying to find somebody who you can share a life with. And today, in a kind of living arrangement that, is not conventional when you think about the history. It's not true that the man's going to go to work and the woman's going to take care of the home. The robots are going to take care of the home. AI is going to take care of the home. And you're going to be able to do what you want to do, and your mate is going to be able to do what they want to do. And both can be productive. So I don't think being productive is anymore it used to be, is anymore a masculine characteristic. So, given how dramatically society has changed, given how dramatically the world around us has changed, our conception of masculinity and femininity needs to change as well. And while certain aspects of masculinity will remain, because some things in the nature of being a man have not changed, the fact that we are, for example, we're more inclined to action than women are. Our definition of what it means needs to change. It needs to accommodate our understanding of the role of reason in human life as the thing that is required for human survival rather than physical force. And that's new, and that's very new. That's 200 years old, and really it's only in the last 60, 70 years that has completely manifested itself, particularly with men and women and the differences between them. And there are differences. I don't know, Finn Hopper says females have sharper senses of smell and hearing. Men have vision is better by picking up movement and feeling. Vision sees more color. All of that is possible. But it's a lot less relevant in the modern world, where you can wear glasses and you can enhance any one of those things. So, what is masculinity? I don't know. Decisive in action. sounds that it's capturing a lot of it. It sounds right, but you'd have to really think it through. Decisiveness, that strength of character, that independence, that leadership aspect, which I think is characteristic of male strength. Action, an orientation towards action, which I think is male. So, masculinity is something about the fact that men are more inclined to act in reality. They're efficacious. So it used to be that to be masculine meant to go out there and do physical labor. Well, to be masculine today should be about being a great programmer, about being able to use AI, about being unbelievably efficacious in the world as it exists today. And the world as it exists today, efficaciousness means not, chopping wood. Efficaciousness today means programming. Now, is masculinity 0, 1? No. There are degrees of masculinity. One of the things that I think the modern culture associates with masculinity, sadly, is stoicism. You see that a lot in the articles you read about masculinity. To be stoic, to be removed, to be unemotional, whereas femininity is associated with emotion. But I don't think that's true. I think emotions both for men and women need to be felt and need to be kept in check. That in making those decisions, decisiveness in action, right? Making those decisions unemotionally, based on the facts, based on reality. But I don't think it's about, and I think it has been. This is why it has been associated, masculinity is be associated with being detached from your emotion. And I think that's very bad to have that kind of perspective on the world and on reality, that we're being detached from our emotion is elevated. No, I don't think masculinity is about emotional detachment. It's about making decisions, taking responsibility for your life and for the responsibilities you've taken on. It's about being productive. It's about all these things, doing them rationally. But it's about being the one who acts, being the one who pushes the envelope, takes the risks. So that's my sense of it, and my sense of why it's so difficult. Again, the left has basically abandoned this area. The left is not interested in masculinity. It's not interested in men, supposedly. It wants to feminize everything. It's not interested in helping boys and men overcome this problem, because just like being white, they blame men for all the problems that men supposedly created in the past. Of course, they ignore the fact that in the past, that role for masculinity was at least to some extent justified. Because that was the world in which we lived. We lived in a world in which force, strength, physical strength was required, was necessary. It gave you an advantage. And women needed it. Women need to be associated with somebody who had that physical force for their own protection and for their own survival. So the left has completely abandoned this. Doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And it's left it completely open for the right to do what the right does very well, which is harken back to the past and present men with a vision of masculinity that's either kind of empty and dull, but at least has some vision, or barbaric. I think Andrew Tate's vision for masculinity is barbaric. It's about being strong. It's about exploiting women, getting as many of them as you can. It's about material stuff. It's about lots of cars and lots of homes. It's about showing off. It's not about being strong in character, strong in will. It's about showing the world that you have it all. It's not about using your mind and looking for women who are challenged, who are going to challenge you, who are going to be your equal in some sense. No, it's about looking for women who you can subjugate. BAP, the whole Bronze Age pervert, is a return to the Bronze Age, when men were men. Yeah, they were men for that age. An age of slaughter, an age of violence, an age of short lives, an age of horror, an age of... last age I'd want to go to. But that's what they admire. That's what they're selling. Anywhere from pretty basic, simple things, take responsibility for your environment, clean your bed, make your bed, clean your room, to, learn to ride a horse with no saddle and a big sword in your hand so that you can conquer the world, because it's about conquest. And look, Tate's vision of masculinity is about conquest. Gail said Tate is a complete freak. He's a complete freak who has millions of followers. Millions of followers. Because they are so desperate for something. And what the right is offering them is a primitive, barbaric vision of masculinity. This is what Knowles and this is what Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh, his vision of masculinity is the 1950s. He wants to be able to go to work and take care of his family, earn the money, come home, and his wife is there with an apron, cooking him food, and the kids are really polite, really nice, and he deals with them a little bit in the evening, and then he goes back to work the next day, and that's real masculinity, taking care of your family. And the fact that that's not the world in which we live, and it's never going to be, and to have that world again, you have to go backwards, and you have to extract from the workforce some of its most productive members, women. That's what they want. They're reactionaries. They're primitivists. They're about going backwards in time, instead of embracing the fact that we live today in the first era in human history. Really. This is the first era, the last 100, 200 years of the first era in human history, where reason is really our means of survival in almost every respect. The first era in human history where we really are living by our minds. The first era in human history where we can make a living using our minds, almost exclusively. Where everybody, soon with robots and AI, everybody will be living by using their minds, not by the use of their muscle, by the use of their minds. And instead of celebrating that, and in a sense we've reached the point where human beings are fully human. We reached an era where we don't have to worry about slaughter and rape and pillage, well, unless you live in Ukraine, but generally, at least in the Western world, we don't have to worry about those things because we're safe. We're rich. We produce by using our minds. What an amazing time to be alive. What an amazing time to be a human being. And yet what they want, what the Tates and the Tucker Carlsons and the Walshes, is they want to go to 1220. Wasn't that 1220 Knowles wanted us to go back to? They want us to go backwards because then a man was a man. And look, the fact that we as men have testosterone and are prone to action, one of the healthy things that has evolved over the last 100 years, because it is relatively new, is the fact that we engage in sports and athletics to the extent that we are. We saw that in Greece. We saw that in Greece because, again, they had reached a certain pinnacle of civilization. Sports is a way in which men, because sports, I think, is primarily a male activity, sports and athletics are the way in which men can express the physicality that is a part of them. It's a way for them to express the necessity to act physically in the world, partially driven by the hormones, the male hormones that encourage us to be more active in a productive way, in a way that's fun and enjoyable and not destructive. And sports does that. Sports helps with that. It's why I think sports is important for men to engage in. And if you look at kids, men and women, boys and girls are different. Again, there are exceptions, but generally they're different. Boys are much more active, much more physical, much more engaged with the physical world, moving stuff in the physical world. Boys' orientation is out there in nature, running around, building stuff, destroying stuff. They're much more likely to get into physical fights. Right? So that is there's definitely a difference, and it's a question of where do you channel that to, and you channel some of that into sports, and you channel it into strength of character. You channel it into independence and assertiveness and decisiveness and risk-taking. Yeah. And again, people have different levels of masculinity. People have different levels of femininity, and that's just the way it is. And a man can be feminine, and a woman can be masculine, and there are degrees of this thing. There are degrees of this, and it's hard to change. I don't know how much you can shape your child's level of masculinity. I don't know if that's doable. It's partially the choices he makes. It's partially stuff that you're born with or not. Some people are born with body frames that are, for example, it's very easy to build muscle onto, and others are not. And that's going to affect, to some extent, masculinity, because it's going to affect that sense of I'm strong, I'm capable in dealing out there with nature. Rand also had the definition in that, men are kind of, masculinity is about being focused on nature, on changing the natural world, and femininity is about the focus on the man. And one other aspect of masculinity, and that is sex. I mean, there are different roles in sex between men and women. The man penetrates the woman. The man is more active typically in sex. It's funny how even sex portrayed in movies is typically It's almost always in the movies when there's a sex scene, the women is on top. And I think that's kind of to counter the idea, oh, men on top, somehow men on top. So they always flip it on, just to, I think, to make that point. But the man is much more of the pleaser. It's much more active. And typically in history, but not always, certainly not in particular individuals, the initiator. And that's part of it. That's part of, I guess, Rand's mentioned as decisiveness in action. I mean, even in sex, that decisiveness. Lewis says Dagney is on top for sure. Now, when it comes to John Galt, or Reardon, is she? All right. I'm sure there are other aspects we haven't covered. I'm sure there's a lot to talk about here. But this really does have this interesting political aspect of the right slotting itself right in there to provide men with answers because they're feeling so vulnerable, they're feeling so confused by, the messaging that the culture sends them, that manhood and masculinity are to be denounced, they're toxic. I despise Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is the opposite of masculinity. He is the bad guy in the action movie. He is the guy who needs to be destroyed, who the masculine hero goes in to eviscerate. There's nothing masculine about exploiting women. There's nothing masculine about being a show-off. The right is slotting itself in to provide answers to confused young men. The confused young men. CARM, you came in late. I talked about why I despise Tate at the beginning of the show, and I gave a detail, and yeah, I mean, he is the exact wrong role model, the opposite of a role model for a young man. He is a disaster, partially because most men can be Andrew Tate. Luckily, they're too good to be Andrew Tate, to be as evil and as despicable as Andrew Tate. But everything about him exudes exploitation and showmanship. So, no, I've done a number of shows on Tate, and just watching his videos, watching what he says about what he does, not what other people say, what he says about what he does, I find him to be despicable, the opposite of a man. He is a wimp, a sleazy con man. I mean, that's what he is. He's a sleazy con man. And he's conning you by trying to convince you that he's a man. He's trying to con you by convincing you that he is a model of masculinity. And he uses his ability as a con man to exploit people left and right. There is no, the opposite of Tate is any decent human being. He's literally not a decent human being. Anyway, I mean, it is shocking to me. Shocking. But we encounter this all the time. The number of men who think Tate is a good guy. And think that model of masculinity is good. That showmanship, that superficiality, that shallowness, and that attitude to women as pieces of meat, of sexual objects, as nothing but to be taken advantage of. I mean, what a shallow life. I feel sorry for them. I mean, women are such amazing, beautiful, stunning, challenging beings. men like Tate don't know what a real woman is. Have no clue what a real woman is. All right. Well, I don't know if Jennifer's right that he doesn't look good. He's obviously works out a lot. He's got what it takes, and women fall for him. A lot of women fall for him because I think he knows how to play them. Sadly, the wrong kind of woman, a woman that I wouldn't want, a woman that many of you wouldn't want. This is not speculation. This is fact, all built on what he says and what he does and what he's admitted to. His videos, his character. Yeah, not a good guy. He doesn't know what a real woman is. That's not speculation. That is fact. That is reality. All right. Let's see. Neither does, a lot of these guys on the right who think they're guys, who think they're men, and who've never challenged themselves. All right, let's see. Yeah, CRM knows exactly how much it costs because he's in on it. He's being exploited. Fed Harper asks, he's not on the show today, he asked this morning, I can't make the show later, but you can address this question. Is masculinity, quote, that which is unique, essential to a male human? Like how human nature is that which is unique to humans? No. Masculinity are certain characteristics that are primarily dominant among men and primarily a part of being a man, but they are not just essential to they're not that which is essential. And saying that is essential to male nature just begs the question, what is essential to male nature? What is it? And the reality is that a woman can be masculine, can have masculine characteristics. So, no, I don't think that's the right way to think about it. All right, Sylvanos, $50, thank you. We're about $262 short. We've got about 95 people watching, so it shouldn't be that difficult to get to our target. You can ask a question at $20 or more. Let's make it $20 questions from now on. About masculinity, or for that matter, about anything. We've got a lot of $5, $10, $2 questions. I'd say, ask questions, $20 or above. You can also use the stickers. Sticker doesn't have to ask a question. You can just use it to support the show value for value, and participate. Well, take Dagny. Is Dagny attractive? So CRM says masculine women is unattractive to most men. Is that true? Well, that's because most men are wimps. Is Dagny attractive? But Dagny clearly shows what you would consider masculine attributes. She also has strong feminine attributes. And yet she is incredibly attractive. And, and it says something about you if you're not attracted to Dagny, I think. It says something about how masculine you are. I think a Dagny requires somebody who's extraordinarily masculine. A John Galt, a Aren. Somebody who's less masculine than them, who's Dagny, see her himself. Maybe you should read Atlas Shrugged. Somebody who's less masculine could not keep up with Dagny. So, a lot of successful women exhibit masculine traits. And that makes them unattractive to what I would consider men who don't have the kind of self-esteem, competence, ability, and masculinity to deal with them. she's also incredibly feminine, which you can combine with both. All right, sorry, Sylvanus, $50, thank you. Reap what is sown. Multiple generations of schools, suppressed boys, laid the groundwork for this whole problem. Yes, I think that's right. Particularly now, I mean, boys get Ritalin, they get drugged because they're hyperactive. Hyperactive means active. They're expressing themselves physically. And boys are told to sit quietly and shut up. They're not given the opportunity to express their need for physical action. And they're told that need for physical action is a detriment, is a bad thing. And that creates the problem we live in today. Absolutely. I agree completely. This is what happens. This is what's happening in our public schools, maybe in some of our private schools. Lewis says, you're taking the argument, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, it's silly and untrue. I think in good times and in hard times, there are strong men and there are weak men. In good times and in bad times, there is good and bad. And what happens, I think, is that in difficult times, you see the difference between the good man and the bad man more clearly. So you notice the good man more obviously. And in bad times, your focus might be on the weak man, but you can't differentiate them quite as easily because the challenge is not there for them to act upon. But the reality is, are there fewer good men? Think about all the entrepreneurs. Think of all the businesses that are being created today. That's amazing. Those are all good people, building stuff, creating stuff. Andrew says, Tate sees man as conqueror. Yes, he sees man as the Bronze Age, a being that cannot be true to himself unless he is conquering something. Yes, but he really means conquering someone. Well, conquering always means someone. To conquer nature requires different attributes than to conquer people. And for him, conquest is the conquest of people. It's like Putin. It's the same mentality. It's the mentality that means what it means to be strong is to be physically strong. What it means to be strong is to subjugate others. It's to put others down. This is what I think the new right is teaching men today. That's what masculinity means. It means to conquer others, to control others, to be hierarchy, right? To be hierarchical, above others and stomp them down. Dagny has masculine traits. And the question is, can people handle masculine traits in a woman? Most women today have masculine traits, to the extent that masculinity means going out there and impacting the world and changing the world and bringing about productive change. Catherine says, please make the difference between assertiveness and aggression clear, as well as the relation between that and interactions between men and women. Yeah, I mean, assertiveness means that you know what you want and you insist on it. Now, to a large extent, I think women are often more assertive than men. Women know what they want often much more than men do. They're much more connected to their own values and their own emotions, I find, than often men are. So I'm not sure assertiveness in and of itself is part of masculinity. And of course, aggression is aggression. It's force. It's a negative. It's a negative for a man. It's a negative for a woman. It's a negative. And to the extent that people associate masculinity with aggression, which I think, again, somebody like Tate does, and certainly somebody like Bap does, they don't understand what true masculinity is. And they're doing harm to the people who listening to them. And then in terms of interaction between men and women, I think masculinity kind of dictates a certain relationship between a man and a woman, a relationship where man is still, to some extent, a protector. A man should be chivalrous and protective of a woman. And to the extent that a man is aggressive, whether emotionally or physically, to a woman, I can't, that is just so, in my view, so horrific, so disgusting. I mean, generally, for somebody strong to beat up on somebody weak is just pathetic. Friend Harper says, I like the hero and hero worshiper formulation. I don't think those are reserved specific sexes, though. One can be both to various degrees. True, but then you can be masculine to various degrees. Be a hero and recognize heroes. Seek values and recognize the values of others. Yeah, I mean, for Rand, man was a hero. Man was, the masculine was that which went out there to discover new lands, new continents, the adventurer, the explorer. Of course, women couldn't, even if they wanted to, in history. And the woman was a hero worshiper. And there's aspect of both of those in all of us. Men tend towards the action orientation, and women tend towards more of the hero worshiping orientation. So it's more of a sensibility. It's more of an orientation that it is. No, there's a line. A woman cannot be a hero, and a man cannot be a hero worshiper. Neither of those is true. A drowsy Liam. What is your opinion of the book, The 48 Rules of Power by Robert Greene? I see the book referenced and promoted most of the time by men. Is a particular kind of man drawn to this kind of concept? I really don't know the book, so I haven't read it. So I shouldn't comment because I haven't read it. So I don't know what kind of power he's talking about. What does it mean? Power over nature, power over other people? Power in the sense of physical power, power in the sense of emotional manipulation. What is exactly he means by it, I don't know. All right, off topic. Adam says, re-accuracy of your claim this morning that California removed algebra from middle schools. Perhaps a crazy village school board somewhere in California, but there is no way, short of referendum, to impose authority statewide. You should check into the law that California passed recently about bringing equity into the classroom and what that implies. This idea that algebra is being removed from many, not just a village classroom, but many middle schools in California, comes from the New York Times, not exactly a publication that is antagonistic to California, not exactly a right-wing conspiracy place. And again, it was referenced explicitly in Noah, I forget his family name, Substack, who is a left of center economist, and the second example that was brought forward was Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is not a village in Massachusetts, but this is where MIT and Harvard are. So no, I think this is quite common in California, in the public schools in California. It's not just some village somewhere, and there is a law that is motivating, encouraging, incentivizing schools to move in this direction. The law is not as bad as its original draft was. They've watered it down, right? The original draft was based on the Stanford egalitarians' ideas. Pretty horrific. All right, we are at about 100 people, $232 to go. So a lot of people in the chat, very active, but show some love or show some value to value. $3 from every person listening right now would get us easily to our goal. So please consider doing a sticker for some amount. I know this is a tough subject that not everybody's going to agree on, and a lot of people don't agree with me, but yeah. Michael Sanders says, war is always the same, young men dying, old men talking. I'm not sure what that even means, but war is not always the same. Not all young men die. Some young men don't die. And I don't know what it even means to say old men is talking. That sounds like it's a meaningless statement. As somebody who's been to war and didn't die. When I was young, not when I was old. Tate subjugates women all the time. He admits it. Watch his videos. I've seen his videos where he says exactly what he does. How he has sex with them, makes them fall in love with them, then induces them to do things that they would otherwise never do, but because they love him and because he's going after mindless girls, because that's his shtick, to go after mindless girls, because that's his self-esteem is so low. The only thing, though, so small his self-esteem is, that the only thing he can actually go after to show that he's a man, to prove to himself that he's a man, is mindless women who fall in love with him and then do anything he says. I mean, that's his words. Watch his stuff. Listen to his videos. Don't take my word for it. He talks about hitting them. He talks about putting them in place. He talks about not letting them leave the house. Not letting them leave the grounds. He does a little tour of his villa, and he says, here's the walls, and he can't leave. They can't leave. He treats women like garbage. He's made a living off of the sex work these women engage in, right? Yeah, they get paid. Absolutely. They get paid. But again, I'm not talking about, has he violated anybody's rights? I don't know if he's violated anybody's rights. He's on trial in Romania. Let them decide that. I'm talking about the kind of human being he is. The kind of human being that seduces women into doing sex work for him. That's what he does. And that's the kind of human being that is being elevated by Tucker Carlson and others, even Jordan Peterson, as a role model for men. As a role model for character. This is the kind of man you want to be? It's pathetic. You guys are pathetic. I mean, this is the reality. Anybody attracted to Tate is a pathetic human being. There's no there. I'm not wrong. Watch the videos. Reality is reality. Facts are facts. You can evade. You can pretend. You can be an innocent, silly young person who gets attracted and seduced by this man who is very, very good at it. He's a very, very good seducer of young men and young women. He seduces them differently. But he is a shallow, superficial, and since when is it virtuous? I mean, it's okay. It's legal in some places. It's not a violation of individual rights. But when does the right, the Christian right, and by the way, Tate talks about religion all the time. He's become a Muslim. That's another interesting thing, is how people love him in spite of the fact that he's become Muslim. And he reads the Quran all the time. When is it in the Quran, which just 10 years ago was considered the most evil document ever, now he's a role model for Christians. He's a role model for the American right. By getting them to do sex work and by getting them to sleep with them and have sex with this gazillions of women. This is the model. The model is have sex. Flaunt your wealth with lots of cars. It's hard to imagine that Jordan Peterson, even 4 or 5 years ago, if you told him one day you'll be saying positive things about a guy like this, that he would believe that he would get that low in his life. Shazbot, thank you. WCZN, thank you. Spyman became a member. Thank you, Spyman. Fend Hopper, thank you. We're only 170 short. So, no, I mean, you guys are just being brainwashed by this guy. It's sad to see young people so divorced from reality. Now, I acknowledge that the left is completely bonkers on masculinity, but so is the right. So is the right. Masculinity is neither what Tate says it is, and it's not what the modern feminists say it is. All right. That's right. All right. Let's see. Stringer Bell. What percentage of women today do you believe fit the mold of Dagny? How should one meet and approach such a woman? I think more women today fit the mold of Dagny in the sense of being productive, being assertive, going for what they really value, going for the kind of careers they want, seeking to achieve the values that they want than ever in human history. So there are more Dagnys now than ever before. How should one meet and approach such a woman? By becoming the best version of yourself possible, by being a great man, by being super productive, by pursuing your values, by using this, by achieving, by starting a company, by being Howard Rourke, by being a Reardon. How did in the novel? How did people meet and approach Dagny? Well, they were at her level. So if you are going to approach a Dagny, you better be as good as she is. And that's hard. That's hard. And men are not used to living up to their women. They're used to just protecting them and shielding them. But now they have to live up to them, which means they have to be as productive as the women in their lives, the women around them. And women are incredibly productive right now, incredibly smart, incredibly knowledgeable. All right, super chat. You want to ask me questions? You want to keep asking questions? Same question over and over again? Put in a super chat. You can do it for $2. Doesn't cost that much, but show some respect. Be a man. Don't just harass people in the chat. Ask a question. Use the super chat feature like others and show some support for the show. Michael, $50. Now that says something. Thank you, Michael. If man is a rational being, doesn't masculinity mean living up to his essential nature, which implies the other virtues? Thus, physicality is an incidental attitude. So it's achievable by men and women, straight and gay. Survival is achievable by men and women, straight and gay. And rationality is achievable by men and women, straight and gay. But masculinity is one aspect of being human. So when I say what defines a human being is being a rational animal. But that's not everything that a human being is. A definition does not encapsulate everything one has to say about a particular topic. you can be a rational being with different characteristics, with different emphases, with different orientations, sexual among others. You could be a rational being and be different in different respects. So masculinity is not a replacement for being a rational being. It's part of being a rational being. Part of being a rational being is living by your nature. Part of your nature is a certain need for action and a certain ability for action and a certain inclination for action, or not. So within rational being is essentializing on that which is required for human survival. That which is required for human survival. But it's not the only thing required for human survival. For example, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, you also needed to be strong. In addition to being rational, you also needed to be strong, otherwise you died out there. But what differentiates us from other animals and what is essential for our survival and thriving and flourishing and success is a rational being. But that doesn't exclude the importance of strength to human beings in the Middle Ages, where they could have been murdered by their neighbor and they had to be able to protect them. Again, you want to ask me questions, there's a super chat. Pitch in a few dollars and you can ask me pretty much anything. And the beauty of a super chat is I answer all the questions. You can put 25 questions there, each one for a couple of bucks. So don't take the definition as encompassing every characteristic. Men and women are different. They're both rational, completely rational. Can be. Most of them are not, but can be. They'll still be different. They still have different orientations. They still engage with reality in a different way. Ask the question in the super chat. Don't just put the money there. Use it to ask the question, because otherwise I can't see the question. If you put it into the super chat, it highlights it. I see it, and then I can answer the question. You can ask as many questions for $2.79 as you want. Oh my God, CARM is Canadian. I mean, that's a whole other challenge, right? I'm kidding. So rationality is achievable by men and women and straight and gay, absolutely. There's nothing that precludes women, gays, straights from being rational. It's just a question of, do they live up to it? Right? All right. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate the support. All right, we're about $100 short. 5 $20 questions, and we're there. Let's see. James, never should the solution be force. Never should the solution be, quote, force everyone to feel your wrath. I empathize with male resentment, but there must be more constructive solutions. Yes. And the construction solution is to channel the energy, to channel the risk-taking, to channel the orientation to action towards productive means. To be a man means to produce. To be a man means to go out there and take responsibility for a life, for a great life, to make that life. To be a man means to protect your values, and a woman is a value, hopefully. To protect your family. To be a man means to be decisive. To know what you want and go out and get it. But to know what you want is within the context of rationality and productiveness and justice. And you got CIA, you got a lot of attention for 279. So you're getting the deal of a century. You want more attention, you have to pay up more, and you have to ask the question in the super chat. You know, the thing about Tate is, of course, he's a package deal. So he says a lot of true things. So when he says, work hard, absolutely, you should work hard. It's part of what being a man is. By the way, it's part of what being a woman is. If she wants to achieve something, she's going to have to work hard. Make money. Yeah, you should be productive. And take care of yourself. Take care of your material needs. And for that, you're going to need money. So absolutely. And be responsible for your actions. And stand by your actions. Right? Be courageous. Be strong. Yeah, all those things are right. And then it's all smuggled in with exploit, abuse, take advantage of, and treat women like shit. All right, Louis Philip Noel. My view of masculinity 2023 is to be your true self. Yes. People are influenced by trends on social media. Also, men are destabilized by the empowerment of women. Men should notice that. Yes, men are destabilized by the empowerment of women is exactly right. They don't know how to deal in the world. And they've not been trained to deal in a world where women are strong, where women are competent, where women can take care of themselves, where women can make more money than they can, where women are better educated than them. Women get better grades than them. They don't know how to deal with it. And instead of rising to the occasion, they're being taught to go backwards, to harken back to an era where real men were men because they had muscles and they had swords and they could slaughter people. Liam says, will France be the first Western European country to collapse? I don't know. I'm not convinced France is as close to collapse as many people think, in spite of the riots and the demonstrations. Collapse in what way? The fear is that France becomes Islamic, but I think it's much more likely that the right takes over France and becomes much more aggressive towards Muslims than that France just capitulates to Islam. Anne says, agree with Rand's view of masculinity and femininity? Basically, yes. I basically agree with her view of masculinity and femininity. I think the question is the details. I mean, her view of masculinity and femininity is not fully, completely articulated. I mean, you can see it in the novels more than you can in what she's written. Are bodybuilders a good representation of full manifestation of masculinity? No. The fact that you can build a lot of muscles does not make you masculine. Your masculinity is not measured by the size of your muscles. Masculinity is measured by the quality of your character. Muscles are important to be healthy, for your health, for your ability to function in the world. So it's good to have muscles. It's good to be strong. It's good to be fit, because that enables you to function better in the world. Whatever you do, even if you're sitting at a computer all day, you're going to be better at it ultimately long term, because you're going to be more comfortable and you're going to be healthier long term if you're also stronger. But to spend an inordinate amount of time on building muscles for the sake of building muscles is a bizarre activity, in my view, and not masculine at all, because it's not going out there and doing something in the world out there. Aren't you blown away by Arnold Schwarzenegger in Prime? No, not particularly. I mean, I'm blown away with Arnold Schwarzenegger's ambition. I'm blown away with his entrepreneurship. I'm blown away with his confidence to come to America and to do the things that he did and to achieve the things that he achieved and to have the balls to go into politics. And then he was a wimpy, he was an awful politician. But I admire Schwarzenegger's character in how he came from a very difficult background. He raised himself up through bodybuilding. He turned it into a career, in a sense, an entertaining people, and then turned that into something incredibly entrepreneurial and incredibly productive and incredibly, virtuous. Not everything he did, but aspects of it. But his body, no, I wouldn't want to look like that. I don't find it particularly, the bodybuilders it's way too exaggerated. And again, it diminishes man as a rational being. That is, muscles are important, but not that important, is the point. They're important, but not that important. That's why, and masculinity is not about muscles. It's about the mind. It's about what you do with your mind. It's about character. Daniel says, Yaron, I'm happy as a hog in the mud to catch your show. Cheers. I'm glad you're here. Glad to have you live. Daniel says, the movie 300 is masculine as hell. Yeah, in the primitive sense of masculine. I don't like that movie that much because it attributes to Sparta things that Spartans don't deserve, and it's too focused on the physicality of it. All right, $100, guys. 5 $20 questions. We can do this. There's no reason we can't actually meet our goals in these shows, guys. We've got a lot of people watching today, so they're there. Theme Master. Does using reasonable force when being physically attacked rely on the attacker to be reasonable back? If an armed person slaps or pushes someone and they use the reasonable force, they can simply be stabbed because they limited their defense. Shouldn't you disable the person quickly, then call the police? If they abandon reason, why should limit yourself with it and give them an unfair advantage? Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think you don't have to fight a fair fight. A fair fight is for wimps. You've got to, basically, if somebody's attacking you, you've got to do whatever you need to do in order to stop the attack, in order to pacify that person. And the initiator force is completely to blame for what happens as a consequence of that. Now, the best thing, of course, is to get away from the situation because you never know how it's going to go. It's to find a way to retreat and get out of the situation. But if you have to fight, you fight with everything you have. You don't fight to be nice. You fight to win. That's true in war, and that's true in life. Robert Nasser, an important topic and still controversial topic. Yes, controversial it is. I hope I brought some interest, clarity into it. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. Adam says, we used to have gyms and now we used to not have gyms and now we have them. That says a lot about the lack of day-to-day physical requirements of humans. That's right. We don't need them. Now, in order to build muscle, we have to go to the gym. It used to be that you just build muscle in your day-to-day activity because it required it. Adam writes, I don't know what it says about me that my favorite YB shows are those in which your dollar goal is harder for you to achieve. But this Tate rant is excellent. He is not to be admired, and neither are the women he attracts. Agree completely. Agree completely. We should be going for much better women. Clark, is walking away from a fight more manly than engaging? Is masculinity more about controlling your emotions or being able to physically dominate other human beings if you need to? I mean, it depends on the circumstances, but absolutely, in many, I'd say most cases, walking away from a fight is the manly, masculine thing to do. Physical force is, you should avoid it to the extent that you can, and you should be willing and able to use it when necessary. It's not about controlling it's about controlling your emotion versus suppressing your emotion. Too much of masculinity is associated with suppressing emotions. It's not about suppressing, but it is about controlling. It's about being rational. It's about using your mind. As Ayn Rand said, decisive in action. But for her, decisiveness would mean rationally decisive. Using your mind and making decisions as they apply to action. And going out there, shaping the world. But shaping the world today is not about muscle, it's about mind. Again, programming is an incredibly masculine activity. Why? Because it provides for human flourishing. You have to change the way you think about masculinity. It used to be that being masculine is about wielding a sword. No, today being masculine is about wielding AI. And the vision for a young man should be, if you have to give young man a vision, then the vision is to be a producer, a risk taker, and somebody who takes his life seriously, is engaged with the world, is attracted to a great, productive, amazing woman, and is willing to rise to the challenge of getting such a woman. It's about giving young people a vision of not just making their bed, but making their soul, of choosing, making the right choices to make themselves into the best man they can be, the best human being they can be, and finding a profession where they can enjoy, but they can also shape the world around them. And today, a profession that shapes the world around you is not a physical profession. It's a profession of the mind. Programming being one of many. Right? It's about shaping the world around you. That's ultimately what it's action. Action oriented towards what? Towards shaping reality. Shaping reality to make it better for human beings to live in. And that's why I consider entrepreneurs incredibly masculine. Even if they're not all buff. But you want to see masculinity, watch one of the Steve Jobs presentation. Even when he's sick and he's thin and looks horrible, look at that presence on stage. Look at a man shaping the world. A man with the world at his fingertips. He in control, in complete control of his environment. That is manliness. That is masculinity. And he doesn't need Bugattis and Ferraris and a million girls on his hands and jewelry or whatever. He doesn't need any of that. And a real man doesn't need any of that. Because a real man exudes that kind of confidence and self-esteem and control over the environment in which he lives, over the world that surrounds him. Doesn't need to show off. He just needs to live and use his mind. That's what it's really about. I mean, is there anything more sexy and more masculine than a Steve Jobs doing his shtick up on the stage, presenting the world with an iPhone? Talk about shaping reality. Right? And you compare that to a Tate? Ugh. Tate is the gutter, literally the gutter. Jobs is the pinnacle. If you want an example of real people, He couldn't handle it, William. He left. He couldn't handle it. Andrew says, Rand wrote that Rook was most concerned with being himself. That strikes me as masculine. How do you think the lack of society's development of individuality of the ego is affecting this issue? I mean, greatly, but look, I think, oh, he's back. Women also, I mean, there's nothing, I don't know that being yourself is masculine, because if you're a woman, being yourself is feminine. So I'm not sure that orientation towards, being yourself is what makes it masculine. I think Rourke is masculine because he's confident in himself. He has massive self-esteem. He has no problem with failure because he knows he will succeed in the end. He is an actor. He doesn't mope around. He's not afraid of challenges. And when the time comes, he's ready to act. He's always decisive. He knows what to do, and he goes out and he does it. He achieves it. He doesn't just think it. He doesn't just contemplate. He doesn't just plan. He executes. He's a doer. And that's part of what masculinity is to do, to act. And what's the primary action that is most important in human beings? It's to produce. It's to be productive. Spyman, Tate's view on cause is probably the most telling thing about his personality. His view on women is the most telling thing about his personality. He isn't a car enthusiast. He just views them as another status symbol to attract women. Well, not even to attract women, to attract other guys to view him as success. So it's not just the women, it's also other guys. It's his claim to fame. He loves cause because it impresses other people. So I agree with you. Tate is a complete second-hander in that sense. He's not a first-hander. He's a complete second-hander. It's all about how other people view him, right? And I don't know. I don't think he's a car enthusiast, but I still think his attitudes, it's a status symbol. That's second-handedness. That's the opposite of masculinity. A masculine man doesn't care about status symbols. A real man cares about achievement, not about symbols, not about what other people can see. Doesn't care about what other people think of him, men or women. Shazbat says, he quotes from Francisco d'Anconia, in a few months, it will be all I have, his new copper mine. It will be all I need. Yeah. That's the kind of confidence. That's the kind of, doesn't matter to him what other people think. It matters to him what he thinks. Tate has, other than his kickboxing career, has no achievements worthy of a man. I know a lot of, scumbags who are worth millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, or however many they're worth. Money is not money, particularly in this sick society, is not the barometer of achievement necessarily. It's how you make the money. And if you make the money off of porn, that's to be admired. Again, compare that. Steve Jobs. It's just not in the same league. He's in the gutter. He's in the gutter. Making money off of porn and conning young people to believe that you have something interesting to say about the world, that is not a great achievement. It might lead you to wealth, but it's not a great achievement. Gail says, for couples, do you think men should be the leader, the driver, or should there be a compromise of ideas? Well, it depends on what. I mean, I think in every, first of all, every relationship is unique, but it really depends on what. There's certain things that my wife is completely the leader. She makes the decisions, and sometimes I have an opinion, but ultimately it's her realm. And there are other things that I make the decisions in. I always drive the car, right? But so it really depends on a particular relationship, depends on particular issues. It depends on the particular. It's not To be masculine doesn't mean you make every single decision in the household. What kind of women would tolerate you if you made every decision for her? Like what was this movie where the guy even orders the food for his wife? He tells her what to eat. I mean, that would be ridiculous. So I think there's a sense in which, because men tend to be more risk-taking, more action-oriented, that they tend to push the relationship forward or push the life forward in a particular direction. It's not always the case, but that's often the case. But that doesn't mean they have to make every decision. Right? So it really depends what leadership in this context means. It's a partnership. Marriage is a partnership. And, in certain issues in a partnership, one partner leads, and other issues another partner leads. Kim, why is it that most men go into engineering, public safety, and other traditional male roles versus women? Is this now a purely cultural reason rather than evolutionary biological one? Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any evolutionary biological one, related to it. I think in the future, it's, well, put it this way, men and women from a very early age seem to be interested in different things. And that will, so when you're very young, your interests get conditioned by choices you make when you're very young. And men and women do make different choices when they're very young in terms of interest. More women tend to want to play with dolls than boys do. And more boys tend to want to play with soldiers and cars and things like that than girls do. I think no matter how you raise your kids, boys and girls will make choices when they're very young that are different. Those choices accumulate and lead to different interests later in life. And that orient men to somewhat different professions than women. As over time, the cultural issues around what are women good for and what women can do and can't do, math, for example, as those break down, women, I think, will go into more traditionally male jobs. And as those break down, men will do things that are traditionally might have been associated with women. But there'll still be different orientations. The averages, on average, again, if you take a curve, men will do more men-oriented things and women will do more female-oriented things because we are different from very young. We are, and those differences do condition certain aspects of how we think about the world and the kind of values that we choose as little kids. And therefore, as we grow, and again, that's not to say for any particular individual, but in general. All right, let's see. Is masculinity impossible without femininity? I don't think so, because I don't think masculinity is contra to. There's a sense in which, according, Rand's definition, femininity is impossible without masculinity, but masculinity is more, because it's oriented towards action and reality. I don't think it is. It is dependent on the existence of femininity. To the extent of masculinity, yeah, I think that's right. Frank, I think about how my dad viewed me as a kid. I like books, TVs, not getting into fights. That doesn't mean I was gay or girl. I couldn't be tough. Yeah, and that doesn't mean you can't be masculine. That is, to the extent, though, that you took care of yourself, to the extent that you pursued your values, to the extent that you acted in the world, to the extent that you went after and pursued a productive career and made something of yourself. To that extent, I think you satisfied at least elements of what a modern day masculinity would entail. masculinity will involve less and less and less fighting. I fought all the time when I was a kid. I mean, yeah, I fought all the time. And I beat up my brother constantly. And I don't know why. I can't explain it. I had an enormous amount of energy. That, you know, if I was growing up today, I'd be on Ritalin, I'd be on drugs. You know, I drove my parents crazy because I would never stop moving. And more boys are like that than girls. Some girls are like that. I know quite a few girls who are like that, but more boys than girls who are like that. Apollo, when is an embrace? What is the difference between the male and the female experience? I don't understand. When is an embrace? I don't know what that is. What is the difference between a male and female experience? I mean, there are lots of differences between a male and female experience. I mean, again, that manifests itself from puberty on in all kinds of things, particularly related to sex. But the fact, or at least the fact that a man is stronger is something that you sense. You sense strength, and a woman is weaker. The fact that a woman has a period every month and has to deal with that, and a man never does. Sex is very different. Even male and female orgasms are different. Everything about the sexual experience of a man and a woman is different. You know. So it feels different to be a man and a woman. It has to feel different because you're experiencing things. You will, as a man, you will never experience what it's like to experience a female orgasm. Many of them, right? Men, you're one and done for a while at least, right? Women are softer. Women are. There's a lot of ways in which the whole way in which that experience is just different. It's completely different. Men are typically bigger. It's just no way to experience being the other sex, and it's not the same. Men and women are not the same. They're not. The fact that we have different sexual organs is part of that, but we also have different physiques. We metabolize food differently. They're just, again, not every particular individuals, but as a population, absolutely. Steven says, more and more people at my work insist on they, them pronouns. I tolerate it, don't care about their sexuality, and I try to use them. But deep down, I find it utterly ridiculous. No holds barred. What do you make of this trend? I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just the latest fad. I think it will pass. I think as they grow older, they'll drop it. I think it's just politically correct silliness right now, and it's just not. It's not this. It's just bizarre. But yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I find it weird. And I get that some people don't feel like the gender that they're born in or whatever. I get that, and I think it's a real issue. I don't think they're making it up. I think it's a psychological issue. For some people, it's a biological issue. There are all kinds of weird biological combinations that cause these psychological issues. But I think that's rare. And I think most of this is about it being cool right now. Most of it about the politics of it. And that's super sad. Spyman says, do you share Peikoff's position on government suppression of Muslim groups? I don't know what you mean. You'd have to give me the specifics of what his position is with regard to suppression of Muslim groups. Gail says, just a comment about film. I'm loving the Korean shows during this famine of American films. I find them so rich in character and content. Absolutely. I mean, the Koreans are just amazing in terms of the kind of series and films that they're making. It's just amazing. And primarily amazing because of the value projection that they have. the extent to which they have those values and their willingness to stick to those values. Fendhopper, whoops, what did Fendhopper say? This is the passion today. Glad I made it live. Oh, I'm glad you made it live as well. William says, I'm glad I spent the time training MMA, boxing, wrestling. I've stopped so I can focus more on entrepreneurship in my free time. Would you recommend most men train to protect partners and family? No. No, because I don't think you need it. Unless you think we're going to some dark ages. I mean, I'm older than you probably. I've lived all over the world. I've traveled extensively. I mean, I've been to, 80 countries. I don't think that's an exaggeration to say I've been to 80 countries. Many countries where I don't understand the language. And I've never had to physically defend myself. I've never been attacked in a physical way where I needed to defend myself physically. I'm trying to think back. I have a wife, I have kids. I would have wanted to protect them, but I've never been in a situation where I needed to. So, in most places, if I'd, you can't do this, but in California, you can't do it in many places, but I could protect them better with a gun, but most, you just don't need it that much. So it's not necessary, it's optional. I most of my life, I have not had guns. I had guns in California for a little while. I had a gun in California in a home for a while. I had a concealed weapons permit, but most of the time it was locked up in a safe. I never saw it. I never fired it. I never took it to practice. I should have. The reality is that we live in the safest time in all of human history. It's pretty damn safe out there. And to spend an enormous amount of your time, unless you really like it, practicing MMA or boxing or wrestling, I think it's just a waste. I mean, if you like doing it, fine, great. You have to be in shape anyway. It's a good exercise to do. But to do it in order to protect your family, no, because the chances your family are going to need that protection are so minimal. It's not like in the movies. They're so minimal. It's just not worth the effort to think about it, to focus on it, to concentrate on it. Andrew, a contribution for a thoughtful presentation on this topic, maturity, is solely needed in regards to discussing these issues. Thank you, Andrew. Spyman, Peikoff thought it was appropriate for the government to stop the building of the mosque at Ground Zero. Yeah, and I agree with Peikoff on that one. I agreed at the time. It was a particular event at a particular point in time. It doesn't mean it's always going to be inappropriate. It doesn't mean, but if you're at war, then the enemy doesn't get to build its mosques over the battlefield or the place where they inflicted casualties on you. So, just at a level of sense of life that's just wrong. So, yeah, I'm with Peikoff on that, but does that mean you can never build a mosque at Ground Zero? No. It's more of an issue of the time and the place and the context. Adam, if a man seeks a traditional conservative type relationship, is that necessary a sign of low self-esteem, or is it a sexual preference like any other? Well, sexual preferences matter. They reflect something about you. Who you choose to have sex with says a lot about you. And I think having a traditional conservative type relationship, I don't know what that means. What does a traditional conservative type relationship actually mean? Where the woman is in the kitchen and you're out there. I mean, it depends on why you have that relationship. It depends on the kind of woman you have. It depends on how seriously she's taking whatever it is she's doing. It depends on a lot of things. Put it another way, the fact that she's not, a productive giant does not mean you have low self-esteem. It depends on her character. And how you relate to her character. Spyman 3000. Are you a fan of Japanese cinema as well? I like some Japanese cinema. I like Akira Kurosawa. I like old Japanese cinema. I'm not a huge fan. I don't know much modern Japanese cinema. I'm really attracted to Korean TV shows because I've never seen such seriousness in the pursuit of values as I see on the Korean shows. All right, thank you guys. You have more questions? Super chat is available. But we're going to call it a night. It's over 2 hours now. There's still a lot to say about, and I'm not sure. I am sure that certainly wasn't a definitive statement on the issue of masculinity. There's a lot, I think, that can still be said about it, and there's a lot of thinking that has to be done about it, and a refining of this issue and boiling it down to essentials that still needs to be done, and I hope that people will engage in that activity. But it really needs to be done at the level of the kind of discussion we're having, not at the level of either what the left thinks of masculinity or what the new right, the followers of Tucker Carlson and Tate have it. All right, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate all the support. We reached our goal. I appreciate that. Thanks to all the supporters, monthly supporters, Super Chat supporters, and I will see you all.